G'day legends, I hope you're all amazing. I've mentioned before on the channel that I think every guitar player should have an EQ pedal or three lying around as a utility tone shaping device. We're going to check out a very powerful EQ today, the Enieqma from GFI system. This one has three core EQ modes, a parametric EQ, a simple EQ, and then a Pultec EQ emulation. That alone makes it pretty unique, but you've also got a built-in limiter, spatial expander, and boost in there. You can see there's a dedicated foot switch for the boost and for the EQ. Now, if you're in the parametric mode here, you'll notice these kind of 5 little touch icons. You can double tap them and activate each band. Then you've got these encoders to tweak various functions on each band, like the frequency, the Q, and the amount of boost or cut. You can change between the different EQ modes using this big knob up here, and you can actually combine them. So you can have the parametric EQ cascaded with the simple EQ, or with the Pultec EQ over there. The really powerful function on here that I think is super useful for guitar players if you're not really used to using a parametric EQ is if you press this encoder here, all the encoders have a tap function and then a tap and twist function. So you've actually got a lot more control than initially meets the eye. We hit that, you've got these things in here called prototypes for each of the EQs. And these essentially are EQ presets. So if you brought up the electric clean over here and we hit that, you'll see that it brings up a preset EQ that you can use as a starting point in your rig. I think that's really, really powerful, provides a great set of directions for the user if you're trying to solve a problem in your rig, like feedback on acoustic guitar or a boost for your flubby amp. There are loads of different prototypes in there, and there's prototypes per EQ mode. Like I said, there's a spatial expander, there's a limiter. We're gonna have a bunch of fun with this pedal. It's also MIDI programmable, and you can attach an aux switch in here. I think it provides a really nice balance between versatility and flexibility on one hand, and then just ease of use, because you can access everything that you need from the front panel on this without having to use a software editor or anything else advanced. So with all of that said, let's make some noise with it. I'm just going to give you a bunch of examples and different ways I've been using this here over the last few months. Let's go. To get started, let's use the Enieqma as an end of signal chain sweetening effect on here. This is great if you're using a modeler or an IR loader that doesn't give you high and low cut filters on here. I've talked about this trick before, but this one does such a good job of it. So let's take a look at what we've got over here. To start off with, the very first band, which I can press over here and activate, I've got set up as a low cut, and I've done a similar thing for the high band over here. This is a high cut or a low pass filter. Then I've got these two bands in here with very, very narrow Qs, and I'm cutting about 3 dB of gain there. This one is at just above 5K. This one's at about 3.5K. They're taking out some kind of really aggressive whistly style frequencies in there. And again, using the narrow Q is handy because I'm not losing all the character from the guitar sound. I can take this even further, but let me just let you hear what's happening. I'll have an amp sim and a cab with no high or low cut, so it's going to be pretty sizzly and boomy. Then I'll kick the Enieqma in, then we'll look at some more tricks you can use if you wanted to run this, say, stereo live and really grease it up. Change to another preset where I've taken those same settings, but I'm running the parametric EQ and the Pultec emulation together, and I can swap between them with this top right button up here. So if I'm on the Pultec, I've got basically this kind of coarse 3-band EQ that I can play around with. So I'll level all of that out. These are just going to be the settings that you heard before, but then I'll give it like a little bit of a low boost, a little bit of a mid dip, and a little bit of a kind of upper mid spike in here. This really brings it to life. We'll hear it without and then with. like that combination of a very tight parametric EQ, lots of control on there. It's quite granular and it really lets you dive in, whether you're using it on distorted electric guitars or acoustic instruments, and then something that essentially is a simple to use character EQ like the Pultec emulation in them. We'll take a look at some of the simple EQ applications in just a little bit, because again, if you're not familiar with all the ins and outs of a parametric EQ, these other two modes are really straightforward to use. But again, I like that you can cascade them together in there. Now, the absolute icing on the cake here is that there is a spatial expander if you're playing in stereo. So go to the stereo expander. There are two modes. One is a short delay, and the other is this dimensional expansion. So basically a dimension style chorus in here. If you know me, you know I love a bunch of grease on my tones. So we'll hear the short delay in there, then we'll hear the dimensional expansion. First, let's hear it without the EQ. An absolutely classic use case for parametric EQ is placing it in your amp's effects loop, kind of imitating, say, a 5-band graphic EQ on a Boogie Mark series. I'm actually just using 4 bands active here at the moment, but I've boosted a bit of 80 Hertz, cut a tiny amount of 240, I've pulled out a whole bunch of 750, and actually just pulled up a little bit around 2K. Let's have a listen to the impact this has. It's pretty awesome if you like heavy tones. Here's a great use case for the so-called simple EQ on here. The default mode is this bass and treble style control, but if you push and twist this encoder, you can access tone stacks in here. Like there's a Vox style tone stack, a Marshall style tone stack, and a Fender style tone stack. So let's go with the Marshall style tone stack, and I've routed this after a Boss SD1 pedal into some pretty clean style amps in my Axe FX3. What I'll let you hear is just the clean sound, then I'll kick the Boss SD1 in, then I will shape in between the amp input and after the pedal output to kind of give this more of an amp in a box style flavor. and a Fender tone stack in there as well. I actually really like the Vox style tone stack in here just to sweeten up the existing clean sound. So we'll forget about the SD1 for now. Let's just hear the clean, and then I'll just use this Vox tone stack up front to make it chimier. With those simple EQ settings in there, you do have access to a tilt filter and a scooped tilt filter. You can kind of emulate a Fortin grind in here with the tilt filter. The settings that I've settled on here is to turn the gain up. So I've got the tilt at around 79. The frequency I've got at around 30 at the moment, but I'll tweak that. Then I can kick in a nice boost over here when I want to. So I'll give it maybe say 10 dB of clean boost on top of that. Let's have a listen to the bypass tone. I'm going for a recto style thing. So a little bit flubby, a little bit fizzy, kind of needs some tightening up and a bit more gain. This wouldn't be one of my videos if we didn't attempt some kind of 80s inspired clean in here, and this actually gives you all of the elements you need to get a kind of Rockman inspired clean in here. I'll let you hear my DI guitar, so I'm just going straight in to the pedal and I'm coming straight out into my audio interface with no post-processing. This is a PRS CE22 on position number 2. Let's take a look at what we've got going on here. The first thing you will notice is that we are using the simple EQ, and I'm using the tilt filter type in here. This gives you a few basic controls. You can think of a tilt filter as kind of being a simultaneous bass boost and treble cut, or a treble cut and bass boost at the same time. Whatever you're boosting, you're cutting the other one. So the gain control here is going to tilt it either way. It's a great name for this type of filter. Then you just simply move the frequency along here. So turning the gain up is going to give us this bass cut and treble boost, and we can experiment with the frequency. I've found really cranking it up to around 70 or 80 works well, but we'll hear some different frequencies. Then we're pairing that with the built-in limiter and the built-in dimensional expander in there. The idea here is that cutting a bunch of bass is going to stop the limiter from pumping, and then of course adding the dimensional expander or the kind of chorus on there is going to add that lovely 80s grease. So if we press up here, we can access the stereo expander. I'll let you hear it off. Short delay at 10 milliseconds, and then the dimensional expansion. Everything else the same. Sounds beautiful. Let's turn that off for now, and let's take a look at the built-in limiter. So you've got three controls in here: the input gain, the threshold, and the attack. You can see I've got the threshold all the way down at minimum. I've got quite a short attack on there, and I have turned the input gain up so it hits it a bit harder. We'll hear it without and then with the limiter, then we'll kick the expander back in. The Enieqma does a pretty decent job of being a speaker simulator as well. This is another thing I didn't quite anticipate on here, but if you're using the parametric EQ type, or of course one of the combination modes, you can go into the EQ prototypes here and scroll down into the 30s where you get some speaker style EQ curves in here. Now these aren't going to be quite as detailed as an IR. They're kind of like smoothed out IRs, but I think they sound pretty good. Let's try this Celestion Greenback G speaker over here. I think the G stands for guitar, and I'll let you just hear a raw, loaded down amp with no cab sim. I apologize in advance. This is going to sound like some bees in a jam jar, but when I kick the pedal in, all will be forgiven. To tweak that a little bit further, you could combine that with, say, the simple EQ, or in this case, the Pultec EQ. And again, if you press this volume or boost button over here, you can select between which one you're editing. So let's just go for the Pultec, and we will give it a little bit of a low peak and a little bit of a mid dip over here. Also kind of give it a high peak as well, just to bring those highs up. Let's have a listen to what that does now. And of course, if we wanted to kind of spread that out, we could add the stereo expander. Let's do a 7 millisecond short delay on here. That's it for today with the Enieqma. Thank you to GFI for sending this one out to me to make some noise with. Hopefully that gives you a good overview of what this pedal can do. There is so much more accessible in there between blending the EQ modes, using the expander and the limiter, and of course, having some fun with those different EQ prototypes. I think they are the real strong points on here. And I have to give them credit for being able to merge versatility, such as the onboard EQ modes, the ability to have different routing options, all the extra fun stuff, as well as MIDI and a nice compact form factor, with ease of use I think the closest thing in terms of functionality out there is the Source Audio EQ2, which I really, really like, but that kind of approaches things from basically a graphic EQ perspective on there. And that thing has so much power under the hood, but you really need to use their software editor to access it. I like on here, you can get access to everything from the onboard UI. Now, the onboard UI definitely takes some getting used to, remembering what to kind of tap or kind of tap and twist in order to tweak. Did take me some time. I've had this for a few months now. I feel pretty comfortable on it now. I think mostly the parametric EQ mode is the most useful to me. And the fact that it has presets, I'm going to dial this in for specific tasks and recall it either using the onboard preset function or using MIDI on here. I do like that you can run this pre-post as well if that's something you want to do. For example, you could have that Pultec style EQ in the loop of your amp, and you could use the tilt EQ as a front end boost on there. You can also set the boost independently per channel, independent EQs per channel. There's a lot of fun to be had and plenty of functions that I didn't touch on this video. If you've got more questions, let me know in the comments section below. I'll put a link to this in the video description. If you like what I'm doing on the channel, my Patreon and the music that I make with Ragdoll is linked in the video description. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.